Hello, this video is on section 2.7, which is titled Absolute Value Functions and Graphs. And learning target for this one is we're going to figure out how to graph absolute value functions. So before I get started, an absolute value function is f of x equals the absolute value of x, and that's what these two vertical bars on the outside is. These mean absolute value. And an absolute value just takes whatever that value is and makes it a positive, or it eliminates any sort of negative sign that's happening inside that equation or any of those numbers. Within every single absolute value function, there is an axis of symmetry. And when we were talking about the different transformations we could make with our functions, an axis of symmetry is the line that is directly between any reflection that's made. So it's the line that cuts it right down the middle to where it's identical on the left and the right hand side of the axis of symmetry. Then the vertex is the point that's the minimum or the maximum of the function. So an example of what the general absolute value function would look like is this: if this is your x and your y coordinates. It's basically just a V is the general shape of an absolute value function. Okay, and this point right here is the vertex, and then the line that cuts it in half, or the axis of symmetry, is right here that goes through the vertex. Alright, so there may be instances where the graph is translated left or right, up and down. It may be reflected vertically or horizontally, or it may be stretched or compressed, just depending on what we're doing to the graph. So if any of those transformations are applying, the graph is going to be in the general form of this: a times x minus h plus k. And each of those letters, your a is the stretch factor, just like in the other transformations we were talking about in the last video. If there's a number that's being multiplied to that function, that's the stretch factor. And the vertex is going to be the point hk. So if this vertex gets shifted left or right, up and down, that's where these two vertical or horizontal translations come into play in terms of the equation. But that's the general gist of an absolute value. We're going to be dealing with all the different types of transformations we talked about. So if you didn't get a chance to understand that material, just make sure you go back through, review it, ask questions if you need to, because this section is basically taking the absolute value function and applying these different transformations in order to graph it. Okay, thank you.